Beck. This is lecture 3 of 3. In this lecture, I will be talking about the article written by Deemer et al., Gender Identity, Sexual Orientation, and Eating-Related Pathology in a National Sample of College Students, which is basically just saying what are the differences in eating disorders by gender and sexuality. It's basically the smaller way to say it, in a national sample of college students. So I will go over this. I'm going to break it down a bit. I'm not going to just pull from the reading. I'm also going to show you guys some videos. I will, if you want the full length videos, I'll give them to you, but I'm just going to show you clips here. Also, if you think these videos are interesting and would like more, I always have a ton of media. So if you ever want to learn more about a topic or watch more videos, let me know. I am a database and I got you guys. And at the very end, I'll give you some more tips about your assignment. So let's go over what they said and then what they meant. So the goal of this reading was to examine associations of gender identity and sexual orientation with self-reported eating disorder diagnosis and compensatory behaviors in trans and cis college students. Or another way to say that is, how do the rates of eating disorders vary by gender and sexual orientation? The methodology looked at rates of past year self-reported eating disorder diagnosis, that's SRED, and past month use of diet pills and vomiting or laxatives were compared among trans students, cisgender sexual minority students, male and female students, unsure students, and heterosexual students, or quote unquote, a large national survey of college students. Basically what this is saying is they looked at uses of diet pills, vomiting, laxatives, eating disorder diagnosis among trans students, queer male cis students, queer students, and then het students. Results: the past year self-reported eating disorder and past month use of diet pills, vomiting, and laxatives were the highest among trans students and lowest among cis het men. Cis queer male students also had elevated rates of compensatory behaviors and self-reported ED diagnosis. Or stated simpler, trans students and queer cis male students have elevated rates of eating disorders. That is the gist of this. So most research on eating-related pathology has focused on cis women. I wonder why you guys think that is. And I'll ask you that in a second. Research on mental illness among trans individuals has pointed to poor mental health outcomes because of discrimination. Studies have also found that cisgender queer men are at higher rates of disordered eating. And so we have some research that has showed us that we need to look more into this. And so in this study, we use cisgender heterosexual women as the referent group. Why do they do this? All right, so results. Compared to cisgender heterosexual women, trans students had significantly greater odds of eating disorder diagnosis, past month use of diet pills, past month vomiting or laxative use. All transgender students, regardless if it was trans male, trans women, trans unsure sexual identity, trans fluid, transgender, all of the various identities, if they were trans, overall there was a higher rate of this than all cisgender participants. And then among those who were unsure of their sexual identity had significantly higher rates of all. So first we're going to listen to Chantel. I wanted to make sure that we at least heard from some actual queer folk. I mean, it's Pride Month, so no matter what you guys did, you were going to get some type of queer something in here, but it also makes sense. Let's actually hear from people who are experiencing this. Same thing with your textbook. I could have given you a textbook that's in 1974, and that's how every chapter was, but I wanted you to have a textbook that could actually tell you, people telling you their own experience. So the first video I want you to watch is Chantel's experience as a trans non-binary person. There we go. Sorry about that.
Hi.
Sorry, it's doing a thing because that's what happens.
I'm Chantal. I'm non-binary and use they, them pronouns, and an ED looks like me. My eating disorder and my eating habits are often kind of dismissed because I looked a certain way. It's just unfair to have to go in to a doctor to talk about concerns surrounding your eating habits, your attitudes towards your body, and to have them take one look at you and deem that you aren't thin enough to be worthy of help. Your weight and how your body is manifesting and responding to the way in which you're treating it is not the only qualifier for you to deserve the help. As someone who identifies as trans, non-binary, gender diverse, it really changes the way in which you engage with your body, and it changes the way you experience people receiving your body. And it was never about being thin enough or looking a certain way. It was always about trying to escape my body and what it was doing and how it was growing and changing and how people were receiving it. And that's much the same as my experience with my eating disorder. So the idea that an eating disorder has a specific look, it's a huge misconception that continues to fail people. Humans come from a wide array of different cultures, genders. To think that we can all be painted with the same brush and be treated the same way because we're struggling with the same thing is just a fallacy. Because I was never really able to seek treatment as someone with an eating disorder. I've had to really rely on access to information. The more organizations like Butterfly put that information out there, the more people are going to be able to pick up on signs and signals that someone might be struggling with something. People deserve to feel comfortable in their body. They deserve to have good relationships with food, and they deserve to be able to access the treatment that they need in order to live a full life. Head to butterfly.org.au. They make sure people like me have access to the information they need to get the help that they deserve.
What if I'm worried about switching phones? Who's keeping my data? If I'm worried about making a switch, will I still be able to access the cloud?
The more body hair I have, I tend to feel that I look more masculine.
So for transgender persons, the body is a very critical juncture where a lot of trans politics happens, given the fact that a lot of our identities in terms of gender do not match how we see our bodies. And this is true for a lot of transgender persons, if not all.
People see me as a stranger, because I don't quite satisfy the traditional knowledge of what a woman looks like.
Shaving used to pain like a bitch. It used to bleed. I used to have scratches, but मेरे को कंट्रोल नहीं था मेरे हाथ पे. ऑटोमेटिकली करने लग जाती थी. वो स्किन मेरे को क्लीन दिखा नहीं कि मुझे मतलब कि अच्छा लगने लगता था, बेटर यूफोरिक लगने लगता था कि अच्छा वो बाल नहीं है. I was so discouraged to body hair.
How my face looks is has been the biggest struggle with my body image, because even at my best, some aspects of me tend to look what society keeps reminding me as to be feminine, not feminine but masculine.
I'm very well convinced when somebody say you look hideous or you look bad. I think that is coming from growing up as a gender non-conforming person and always told that I look different and also I look weird in the way that I am. But yes, it is the biggest struggle is to love oneself the way that I am.
Where I went for my interview, my job interview, so they noticed that I'm a trans. So they told me they don't have vacancies. मेरा body देख के मेरे कैसा मैं job नहीं कर सकती हूँ बोल के वो लोग कैसा notice कर सकते हैं. Give me a chance. I can prove myself.
I think the biggest struggle for me, honestly, has been to find a right pair of heels, that matches my shoe size. I mean, I know I have gigantic feet, but I would really like a good pair of heels just to feel how good it is to stomp on feet.
I'm not laughing because people were struggling. I just thought you stomp on the patriarchy. Go ahead and stomp on the patriarchy. Okay. And I'm not just gonna throw this at you. I'll talk to you about some reasons for why this is. But again, they're telling you why this is. So instead of me just telling you for them, I can literally let actual trans folk tell you why it is. So, but I will give you a recap as well. Cis men or cis SM is sexual minority. So cis queer men had significantly elevated odds of an eating disorder diagnosis. And so back whenever I did my undergrad at Penn State, I was the program and community outreach intern for the LGBTQA Center at the time. I was also involved in a couple queer organizations, and it was mental health month at Penn State, and I organized an event for mental health in the queer community. And it had a great turnout, which I'm happy about, but also sad about, because it was an event that people came to because they were hurting. And I'll never forget with one of my, we were friends, but at the time, whatever. I'll never forget what one of my friends said when he came to this mental health workshop for queer folk. He said, yeah, I mean, I'm straight skinny, but I'm gay fat. And I remember saying, what do you mean by that? As I saw other queer men nodding as he said it. And when he said, I'm straight skinny, but I'm queer fat, he meant, yeah, sorry about that. He meant, yeah, in terms of what's expected of a typical, guy in society, I'm fine. But in the gay community, it's so much stricter that maybe I'd be, skinny to a heterosexual cisgender woman, but whenever I'm on Grindr, they think I'm fat. And that never left my head. And as a person who thinks a lot about gender and sexuality, I would have always included a lecture on sexuality and gender if I'm teaching about mental health. I mean, to me, it's obvious that it belongs. But that sentence of I'm straight skinny, but I'm gay fat, I make sure I include it every time I teach this class, because it's really it encapsulates everything that I think this study talks about why queer men are having these eating disorders whenever we think of eating disorders as a woman thing. So why is it that so many queer men are having eating disorders? All right, I'm going to show you another video. There is some language used.
You're just ugly. Go lose.
There's some language, so just a heads up.
You're just ugly. Go lose weight.
Nice to see that your dick still works.
This just isn't healthy.
You should have bigger boobs, a smaller waist, bigger hips, bigger butt.
You're short. You're bald. You should be honored that I would let you suck my dick. You're not taking care of your body.
I could never be with someone like you.
I didn't have a right to reject him because I was fat.
In my experience, I came out when I was 34. I went on Grindr and pretty much was surprised and shocked of what I was seeing.
I find that people want to connect with you if you are a very particular aesthetic.
You know that this is stupid. Why is it upsetting you? And then I had to catch myself and I was like, okay, well, I'm allowed to be upset. I've always had to deal with people prejudging me for being big. And yes, I'm confident now, but this confidence hasn't been here always.
I do pick at myself already. Some people were just mean for no apparent reason.
For somebody with a disability or somebody who can't access the bars, the apps are where everything takes place, where when somebody's mean to you, that lives with you.
It made me feel like, one, I wasn't queer enough, like I wasn't fit enough.
And then when you call somebody out for that, they say, oh no, I didn't mean it, I didn't understand.
The community that I was supposed to be a part of wasn't a community to me.
All those things, eventually, they build up.
And it's like, well, then if you didn't understand, why did you say that?
Is that really how you talk to people?
If you're saying something online that you wouldn't say in person, you're kind of just being a coward about it.
The word that we like to hide behind specifically online is preference. My preference is you have a job. Like, my preference is that you're not trolling people on the internet. My preference is that you're passionate about something. My preference is not that you're a racist, bigot asshole.
Sometimes I want to hop on the app to just really to look at some dick. I want to do all the things that my peers are doing, but I have to navigate prejudice so openly, and I just don't think it's fair.
The audacity of someone to say, like, I'm not going to talk to you or whatever because of how you look, when the government is really fucking saying that trans people can't be in the military or gay people can't have cakes baked for them. Like, who the fuck do you think you are?
Trans girls are like supposed to have all these surgeries. I have some friends that love their bodies and don't want any surgery.
I wish they just treated everybody like they were a person. You don't have to reply with something mean.
To combat it with equal negative energy is counterproductive for anyone.
I try to see the person for the person. You can have a really great chemistry with anyone. It doesn't matter where they're from or their height or their weight.
We need to stop like putting so much worth in what other people think. A lot of things need to stop being so based on like the physicality of someone, and really kind of find out like what makes you special and uplift that.
If you're not like a mask or like a nice looking twink or like trans girl that has like obviously all the surgeries, and it's kind of just like, oh, you're nothing.
We divide ourselves so much more between race and physical stature. Once we accept ourselves and we don't give into the stigma of having to have the perfect body, having to be a upper class cis white male in the gay community, that's the first step.
So I want to see people who are marginalized take ownership of that and make it something that they don't have to be scared of or hide from. The prejudice is going to be there no matter what you do. And so I think my advice would just be to do it harder, to be more disabled, more queer, more marginalized than you've ever been before, because that's how you create change.
Just be kind to one another. Once we take that first step, I think we'll be heading in the right direction.
Al Kuzma is now a part of Panera's Unlimited Tip Club. And endless sips to pair with any drip. For one job.
We are back with GMA Out Loud, our month-long Pride series looking at issues affecting the LGBTQ plus community. Today we examine body shaming and body dysmorphia. Gay men make up 42% of men with eating disorders. Gio Benitez back to tell us more about it. Hey, Gio.
Hey, George. Yeah, this issue is only made worse by comparisons on social media. Now this morning here, though, a slew of young gay men are tackling this issue, one TikTok at a time.
People talk about my weight because of how skinny I am.
They are the TikTokers taking on body shame.
Muscle dysmorphia is a major issue.
A growing number of gay men are publicly pushing back against what they call bullying within the gay community over how they look.
I've had someone actually say, if you lost a little bit more weight, I think we could go on a date.
A study showed gay men had lower body esteem scores, higher rates of eating disorders, and greater concerns for physical attractiveness compared to straight men. Nico Cassidy grew up as an overweight kid in upstate New York, but once he got to college, body expectations led him to extreme dieting.
You're so gay, you're fat. It's definitely deep-rooted with shame from childhood and just to be who we are. And I think that shame kind of comes out and portrayed as like a little bit more of a superficial vibe.
Sam Coffey posts his body with pride, calls himself full-figured and body positive.
And there is an unwritten and kind of unspoken Adonis complex that happens, especially within American gay culture.
Experts point to social media and dating apps affecting all of us, gay and straight. One study showed digital comparisons led to users feeling worse about themselves.
The pursuit of the ideal body or the pursuit of perfection can certainly be damaging, can lead to depression, anxiety, self-esteem issues.
Nico and Sam say they hope speaking out will help change perspective.
The one thing that I've learned is to just confront things as they happen, because if you actively are working on yourself, you will always have hardships to overcome, but you'll always be the best you can be.
My relationship with my body, I feel it's a growing relationship. I'm getting used to me.
And experts say some of the most helpful tips are to reduce your time on social media and redirect your focus to something else. But of course, George, that's easier said than done.
Sure is. Let's talk to our expert, Dr. Jenna Ashton. You don't hear a lot of talk.
Okay, and then this probably isn't too surprising, but more nuanced than you might think. Cisgender heterosexual men had the lowest odds of everybody. Now remember, cishet women were the referent in this study. However, we still found that cishet men had the lowest odds of all. But remember, what does it say here? SRED, self-reported eating diagnoses. So what might be a reason that cisgender heterosexual men might not report having an eating disorder, even if they experience one? What do you think? All right, so the last video, we're just going to watch a clip of it. We're not going to watch the entire thing. However, it is an excellent video. So I'm going to give you the link for it, but we're just going to watch a clip.
I have people message me on Instagram saying you're really slim, I like your hair. The only problem is I'd break you.
I'm walking on the beach, everyone's just turning, looking at me like, I'm not even big.
I starve myself, which I have to do to get my body to eat itself.
Well, all right, fat boy. Oh, hold off. He wants a sausage.
As I've got older, I've come to accept that the one thing that I can't change on my body is my penis. Where we stand at the moment in 2018 for guys, there's a massive, massive pressure for us all to physically look like maybe a Greek god.
In order to be masculine or attractive, that you should be well built. You can't show any weakness, you can't show any feelings, you can't show any softness.
You have an expectation to be strong.
Flat stomachs, abs, muscles.
Looking great, looking groomed.
The ideal body type is definitely six-pack, puffed out chest.
Oh yeah, shredded. He's ripped.
It was always pushed into my brain about you have to look a certain way.
It does play with your head quite a lot. I think, no, I could be bigger.
Me wanting to look a certain way, that stems from childhood, really. My dad always said to me, you have to look physically strong, and he drilled that into me from a very young age. I'm kind of okay with my physique, but it's that thing of striving for perfection, even though I know I'll never have perfection.
I was a 30 waist, then it was a 32, then a 34. Then people started making comments about, oh, is he pregnant? It was always a bit of fun, but somewhere in the back of there rings a bit of truth. It hurts. I wanted to do something about it. Just puts that fear into you of making a change and failing.
People assume that when you've got an eating disorder, you look skeletal, that you look incredibly thin. But I was never like that. I could look just like a perfectly healthy weight, and people wouldn't know that I had bulimia.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the video there, but again, like if you want to watch more, I posted the link. I'd love to talk more about it. It's a fascinating video. If we were in person, like, you know, the big lecture hall with like the big screen, we'd probably watch, you know, the longer versions of these, but having you watch a video of a video of a video, like, it's not as exciting. But if you want to watch them, please go for it, because like, especially this one, that they're pretty cool. But I guess the reason I wanted to show you that is we have, you know, the first guy, he's the average person would look at him and assume that he is a cisgender guy. The average person, you know, if you take a random boomer or random 30, 40-year-old, you know, whatever, even just random person who's not like actively looking for, you know, like being gender progressive, you take it just a random person off the street, they say, oh, that's a masculine straight guy. He's tall, he's muscled, he has the appropriate facial hair, and he's talking about his body eating itself. How he's since childhood felt compelled to know that he'll never be perfect, but always try. These are cishet men. The ones that they showed were cishet men. And they're worried about their weight. And they're engaging in, you know, behaviors that are absolutely, you know, indicative of eating disorders. But probably until this video, they might not have ever even thought of them like that. And so, yes, the fact that we see women, queer folk, trans folk experiencing the highest rates makes sense in terms of social pressure to look good. Queer men feel that they have to look good for other queer men. Het women feel that they have to look, I mean, geez, everybody got to look good for men, I guess. Trans people feel that they have to, or many feel that they're forced to fit the conceptualizations of what a cis person looks like, for example. And so it makes sense why we see marginalized people having these pressures. But the same pressures of having to look right, looking as though you fit the part, cishet men feel these pressures. These pressures are also there for cishet men, but not in the same way, and they're not really allowed to talk about it in the same way either. So overall, we find that trans participants and queer men had increased rates of past year self-reported eating diagnosis or eating disorder diagnoses relative to cishet women. This is important to know because so little research has been attended to men and trans folk. There are several explanations for why trans identity is associated with higher risks of eating disorder diagnoses and compensatory behaviors. One, disordered eating behavior is a way to control how you look. Flat out. We think about it in terms of being skinnier or having a smaller waist, but ultimately, one thing that it does is accentuate certain features. If you are somebody who wants to accentuate your breasts or make your breasts look more like a chest, or if you want to accentuate your waist or make your butt look bigger, these things that we think of as gendered parts of the body, a big chest, wide hips, a small waist. One way that we might see trans folk, especially if you don't have the money or the support for surgeries, if you want them, not all trans folk want them, but if you are a trans person who wants to change your body, but doesn't have the resources to do it in the gym or with surgery, one way to do it is to change your diet. And it might not always be the healthiest foods that you're taking, but one way to accentuate different parts of your body would be to change your diet, vomiting, diet pills, etc. So one part could just be trying to live in a society that expects trans people to conform to hyper femininity or hyper masculinity. Minority stress. Otherwise put, it is just hard to be a minority, to be marginalized. And so minority stress is a stress that's experienced by individuals who are stigmatized as a result of their social position. And so discrimination, violence, victimization, the pressure of feeling you have to conceal your body, social alienation, internalized social stigma, all of these can make your appetite be a little, excuse me. All of these can contribute to depression. Sorry. And as we talked about, comorbidity, eating disorders and depression overlap. Eating disorders and anxiety overlap. And so if you're feeling very anxious, you might not be eating too well. You can't get out of bed, you might not be eating too well. If you're depressed because you just got hate crimed 3 days in a row, you might not be eating too well. Like on the other end, if you feel as though people are treating bad because of how you look, then you might change how you look, try to meet that. And so on one end, there can be actions because you want to accentuate your hips or your waist, but also just living as a minority can be stressful. Finally, and this one they all make sense, but this one especially makes sense in a different kind of way. These are self-reported eating disorders. Trans people tend to have greater contact with mental health professionals than the general public. If a trans person wants to have a surgery or wants to get hormones, they have to talk to a therapist and so many doctors and talk to insurance. And so trans people who do seek treatment are forced to jump through hoops. Not that, some practitioners are amazing, some therapists are great, but part of the trans experience, if you are a trans person who wants to seek medical treatment, not all do, but if you do, you're gonna have to jump through hoops with practitioners and insurance. The more psychiatrists, the more therapists you come in contact with, the higher the chance is you're leaving that office with a diagnosis. And so what we have here is like 3/4 of trans folk had received in this study had received counseling at some point. 18% of all trans people in a national study had used mental health services in the past year. And so it's not necessarily only that trans people just have higher rates, but they're coming into contact with the mental health field more often. So they're more likely to encounter a diagnosis, right? And so think of it like this. If 2 people have lung cancer, but only one goes to the doctor for an annual checkup, it's not that that one person has more lung cancer, they're just more likely to get a diagnosis. And so one reason we might see such a high rate of eating disorders with trans people, it's not just minority stress, it's not just actions taken to, reshape the body or adjust the body. It's also that because trans people are forced to come in contact with mental health professionals so much, they also just come in contact with diagnoses more. All right. So the last thing that we'll do, I will show you your assignment sheet. I'm not going to go over the whole thing because I do want you to watch this. Well, I'll read it for you. Okay. So you're going to watch this episode. You have to watch the entire thing from beginning to end. You can write about what came up. So if you want to write 2 pages on how this made you feel, I'll read it. I'll make time for you. I'll do it. But you only have to answer these questions. If you want to add more, you can. But what I don't want you to do is write 3 pages on, actually, let me add that too. Let me say, let's say 3 pages, double space. Sorry, let's say 3 pages, double space. I don't want you to write 3 pages about how you felt and then not answer any of the questions. So make sure you answer the questions. And if you want to add more, that's fine. So I'm going to ask you about the size of Lexi's support system and why you think it is that way. Stress theory and how it relates to Lexi's life. Perceived support and how it impacted Lexi in the episode. Relating the episode to the support lectures on Tuesday and Thursday of last week and Tuesday of this week. Relating the episode to what you learned today about gender and sexuality in any way. It can be in any way. It doesn't have to use a keyword. It can be, hey, that example you gave about that one person that one time, I think it makes sense here. Any way you want to connect these, you go ahead as long as you do it twice for each. And then do we see more examples of internalizing or externalizing symptoms? Then you have a bonus question for the bonus. You have to answer which one of these is the right answer and then justify it. That way you can't just guess. You have to pick the right one and then explain why that is. It's 10 points. I have the point breakdown. You do have to understand lecture to do well on this, and you have to watch the video to do well on this, and you can't chat GPT it. Sorry. And if you do, I already like chat GPT'd it, so I kind of know what the answers look like if it tries. So like, just don't do it. Like, let's just not do that. Okay, review. Watch this episode thinking about the connection between social support and gender and sexuality. Keep in mind the 3 reasons why the mentally ill have smaller networks. What is the psychiatric perspective? What is the stigma perspective? What are the caretaker obligation perspectives? The 3 big influences on whether a person develops a mental illness. So what is the role of stress in developing a mental illness? What is the role of coping support and coping mechanisms in developing a mental illness? What is the role of social support in developing a mental illness? And then what is the relationship between perceived, received, and structural support? If you keep these in mind when you watch this episode, you'll be able to write that paper in an hour, 2 hours tops. I mean, I'm saying literally, if you keep this in mind, when you watch that episode and write that paper from this point until when it's done, a couple hours max, you could have it done. Watch the lectures, watch the episode, answer the questions, answer the bonus because bonus, right? And then proofread because please proofread and submit it to Canvas. So Sunday, assignment number 3 is due. On Tuesday, we'll talk about class. You have 1 reading on Canvas. On Thursday, we'll talk about race. You'll have 1 reading on Canvas. I did make a change. Intersectionality was supposed to be June 27th. I'm going to break intersectionality down into 2 parts. Part 1 will be on Thursday of next week, and part 2 will be on the 27th. The reason is because next Sunday, your assignment is on intersectionality. And I want you don't need to understand the full lecture to do it. I walk you through the entire thing. However, having some sense of intersectionality will be helpful for you to complete that assignment. I think you'll do better on it if I at least give you some kind of heads up. So it's not going to be extra lecture material. I'm not assigning you an extra reading on your end. You just do the same thing. I'm just giving you a heads up. I am going to do a bit on intersectionality next week, just so you don't think that you missed a week or something like that. Okay, if you need anything at all, let me know. I am here for you, and I will talk to you all later.